Dr. Kissinger, I'd like to start with President Obama's upcoming visit to Beijing. You've served for 3 U.S. presidents and have done mission for 10. You helped arrange, sometimes engineer their visits to China. Help us understand, what can we expect from a state visit like this, and what problems do you expect President Xi and Obama to solve at this point?
There are two levels to all of these state visits. There's first a kind of philosophical, conceptual level in which the leaders say to each other, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? And then there's a practical level that deals with some specific issues. Now, the philosophical level was begun at the meeting in California last year between the two leaders, and in the statement of President Xi, that his objective was to create a new pattern of relationship between countries that in history might have been adversaries. So I'm sure that that level is going to be discussed even further. But then there are a number of concrete issues in the world. Environment, climate, proliferation, I would say future of Afghanistan, Northeast Asia. Then there are some areas where there have been that not always identical opinions, like East China Sea and South China Sea. And I expect that all of these issues will be discussed. And having talked to senior members of our government, including those who helped prepare the visit, I'm very optimistic that the meeting will be positive. And I know, having had the privilege of enjoying Chinese hospitality, I know that the experience for the American delegation will be very memorable.
Right, on the philosophical level, in your book on China, you went into great lengths to explain the Chinese exceptionalism versus American exceptionalism.
Yeah.
And if both countries, as you articulated in the book, believe that they're exceptional, do you genuinely think that they can still build a so-called a new type of major power relationship?
The Chinese exceptionalism is not missionary. The Chinese exceptionalism is cultural. That is, it does not attempt to make the world Chinese. It bases itself on its performance and then expects a level of respect that is appropriate for the occasion. The American exceptionalism is more missionary. And it is possible that some disagreements can develop on those grounds. But I would say the test of our two leaders will be the ability to understand that there are maybe some different approaches, but there's a greater necessity in peace and progress in the world. When you think back to Chairman Mao and Nixon, there were certainly big differences when I first arrived in China, but they were overcome, and a very constructive relationship was developed. This time we already have a constructive relationship, and now we need to build on that. And there are things, like you mentioned, that we have to keep in mind. But I believe they will be handled constructively.
In your book on China, you coined the word co-evolution in the Pacific community. What exactly does that mean?
Well, what it means is we should not require China to act like we do. China should not expect us to act like China does in all respects. What we should expect from each other or try to achieve is that we each develop our societies in the way we think are most appropriate. But as we do this, we keep in mind that we move towards similar and sometimes identical goals. So we progress side by side, but not necessarily to the same music.
Next, I want to talk about China's new president, Xi Jinping. He has been in power for almost 2 years now. You met him, you talked with him. What kind of a leader do you think he is, and where is he taking China?
My impression of President Xi is of a very thoughtful and strong personality who has assessed the situation of China when he took over. And he has concluded that to make comparable progress as had been made in the 30 years before he took over, China needs to undertake significant reforms in key areas. And he has specified these areas in starting a process of reform that history will consider as significant as any of the previous.
We know this year is a big anniversary, 35th anniversary of the relationship. I'd like to take us back to those months and weeks in 71 and 72. How hard was it for you, for President Nixon, and for your Chinese counterparts to rise above domestic politics and establish this very relationship?
I consider myself very lucky to be able to participate with a number of great men in doing something new. One doesn't often have that opportunity in life. When we started, there had been 162 meetings between Chinese and American diplomats, which had no progress whatsoever.
In Geneva and Warsaw.
And Warsaw. I think both sides were lucky in the sense that Chairman Mao on the Chinese side and President Nixon on the American side said, let's put aside the quarrels of technical subjects. Let's concentrate on talking to each other about where we want to go. So that way we can understand what we're trying to achieve. And when you read the first conversations between these leaders, they talked almost like philosophers. We had to overcome a number of established principles, say on Taiwan, but it happened. And it happened in a friendly atmosphere. And it laid the basis for 40 years of, on the whole, improving relations.
You're 91 years old. You have been in diplomacy for 60 years. What do you think current and future leaders, young people in both countries, should remember from those weeks and months in 71, 72, where you engaged in behind-the-room maneuvers as well as public diplomacy? Those weeks and months that proved to change the world. What can the young people learn these days?
Well, you have to begin with a correct analysis of where you are. Where do you find yourself? Then you need an agreement or at least an understanding of where you're trying to go. And to set yourself objectives, I would say to be at the outer limits of what you're capable of, and not make it too easy. And third, you have to treat each other with mutual respect. And neither side should try to impose its preference by pressure. And those are the three requirements. And I'm optimistic.
In your new book, World Order, which I read, you said the search for world order has been, quote, defined almost exclusively by the concepts of Western societies, and this concept is now in crisis. So what should a new world order look like, and what does it take to build it?
I don't know exactly what it will look like, because it's being built. It has to recognize that the system of world order that existed in the 19th, early 20th century was a European invention. And China has had its views of world order. Islam has had views of world order. And we now have to find a way of doing one of two things, of making these various concepts compatible with each other. Or when there is one concept, like the caliphate concept, that asserts that it wants to dominate the world, that it is defeated by joint efforts.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kissinger.
Great pleasure.